It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword. Welcome to the Double Stop. I'm Brian Sword. I've got a bit of a cold this week, but I'll croak through this intro. This week on the show, I have Marc Ford, who most of you will know from his time in the Black Crowes. He also has a great solo career with 5 solo records. He's played guitar for Ben Harper, and also had an early band, Burning Tree, that led directly to him getting the gigs in the Black Crowes. He's had lots of ups and downs in his career, and he seems to be in a pretty good place these days. This week is the story of Marc Ford.
There were distant relatives that played some things. And there was a player piano in my grandmother's house. But other than that, and the odd Burl Ives record or something strange like that playing at my grandparents' house. There's big band stuff a lot, and stuff they were into when they were kids. And then my mom had a couple of Beatles records, and I found some old 45s that had some cool stuff on it, but not a whole lot. I mean, they weren't like music listeners. It was on in the car, but it wasn't part of the household kind of regular thing.
And when did you come across music then?
I thought it was fascinating. It just really intrigued me. And the piano at my grandparents' house, it was a player piano, so you'd pump the pedals and then the paper thing roll would spin around. It's kind of a scroll and had holes in it that would make the piano play. And I'd just sit and pump that thing and stare at it and watch the piano go. But wasn't really until I got a guitar when I was 10, because I'd go with my grandmother to a swap meet around the Rose Bowl every month, because she was an antique collector.
Oh, cool.
And I just saw this old man playing his guitar, and I just had to have it. It just pulled me all day long. I couldn't get my mind off it. So I begged her to break with the $8 to buy it, and she finally did. And you couldn't really play it past the 3rd fret because the neck was so bent up. But man, I love that thing and never put it down.
Do you still have it?
No, my younger brothers destroyed it.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, they were quite a bit younger than me, so they were terrorizing the house, and I was kind of already out of the house at the time. So I was gone most of the time, and they would get into my closet and take it and play with it, and it just fell apart.
So when you got that first guitar, what was your path in terms of learning it? Did you take lessons? Did you just kind of bunker down in your room and figure it out? Or what was your path to it?
There was an elementary teacher, cause where I went, who first, I guess the school decided they were going to try out these sort of elective period, I suppose, to get you ready for junior high or something, that for one period that there were different electives. And one of my teachers taught guitar for one of the electives. And then he, you learn the first position, sort of like B and A. And then that didn't last very long, but he taught a night class for housewives, bored housewives. And since I did all right in his class, he let me go to the night class. And we just sort of learned all the regular chords and sang along to the songs of the day,
And was that all on acoustic, or were you playing electric by then?
Yeah, that was all on acoustic. I had upgraded to a Yamaha classical, and then a steel string, and then my first electric was a Hondo 2 Les Paul copy, and black, like Peter Frampton, and except with 2 gold pickups instead of 3 white ones. but it was close enough for me.
Were you a big Frampton fan?
Well, I mean, you couldn't escape that record
No.
then, you know. And that was my first sort of guitar record after I was really into Elton John and Yellow Brick Road, and so a neighbor turned me on to Peter Frampton, so I got it and wore it out like everybody else. Right.
Now, in terms of your transition to electric, when were your first bands, and what kind of music was that?
As soon as we started meeting each other in school, finding out, oh, you play, we would all just sort of gather in somebody's garage and just make noise forever, and, until we couldn't do it anymore. And it was just mostly somebody would start something and we would just follow along until we got tired, and so, I mean, I thought about that that was really sort of the paving ground for improvisation and not necessarily following a set rule of things to play, more just getting in with everybody and making one big sound. And I'm happy for it. It was a long learning curve, but I probably learned some lessons you can't get in a book.
Oh, I bet. And in terms of jamming from the garage to playing out somewhere, was it like a backyard party scene, or when were your early gigs?
Well, it was pretty early in high school. I mean, we did the talent show, but I think I was 15 when I started playing in clubs. And then once I got a car and I was playing up in Hollywood or just wherever, Southern California parties, I decided that school was getting in my way of making music in clubs. So I told my parents that I needed to quit, and I was bored and wasn't doing me any good, and I'm a guitar player and I should be playing the guitar. That didn't go over well with my banker father. And,
yeah.
Statistics and 1 in 10,000. I said, yeah, but I'm the one. And so I got all my credentials and everything taken care of, and then just obsessively decided I was going to somehow become Jimi Hendrix.
So you're finishing whatever your high school age. Now, what would your path then for guitar being? Would it be join a band and go, or, some other guys do the GIT route, but what did you decide to do then?
All I knew is that you got together with your friends and played music, and then we started sort of coming up these songs, and I always wrote my own songs. Just, I think, really, I never could really copy anything exactly, which I think probably is a great thing. I'd get close and then get bored to figure it out exactly and do it my own way, and wrote songs with my acoustic when I was really young, and just always sort of just make one up, and so we'd play at a party, and then that would turn to another party, and that would turn to a club, and then we started meeting guys in other bands, and your world just got bigger and bigger. And there was no internet or anything around, and there wasn't even answering machines. It just your world expanded by meeting these and networking people, and then it reached up into Hollywood, and it was over years and years, but long hard ones, and a lot of floors and couches, but basically ending up playing a type of music that really wasn't done in Hollywood at the time. It was big hair metal, and there was one club that let us play, and so then a new sort of scene started around this one club, and these people who liked the older style music, and then we got signed out of there, the Coconut Teaser by Epic Records, and went on to glorious fame and luxuries.
Well, okay, so you're talking what, mid '80s at this point, late '80s?
Yeah, because let's see, the Burning Tree record came out in 1990, I believe, 89 or 90. So yeah, it was like, I was supposed to graduate in '84, but I left early, so it was most of the '80s I was out trying to, I was either in the Who or I was Jimi Hendrix or, Jeff Beck, it's like, so, and no one else was except for the few people that I knew.
Exactly. So this is mid '80s. You're in Hollywood, and you're playing Hendrix when everybody's going to see Rat.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
how hard was it to break through on that, and how hard was it to stick to your guns to not go that route? Because you get even bands like Alice in Chains, who came along, early '90s, they still had a hair metal phase, and Pantera and all these other bands had the hair phase. But how did you avoid that then?
Well, I had a little hair.
Did you?
This wasn't as long, We
Right.
still took, I kind of came up in more of a goth sort of scene and this sort of underground, I'm not thinking of the band's name. Bela Lugosi's dead, and just that whole scene. So they had big hair too. So, but it was a different kind of thing, It wasn't so goofy and girls. It was a little more inward and dark, and I think that sort of set me apart too. There was just no way I was gonna do any of that. I hated the music, and the '80s was a nightmare for me. Because, I can look back now and realize, well, there are some really good songs and there are some really good bands, but I couldn't hear it at the time because I was, singular minded in my pursuit of, the mid to late '60s guitar sound, And I had no point of reference. I didn't know if it was harder than anybody else's deal. I just knew that they had bigger gigs that I wanted on, and why hasn't everybody recognized me yet?
Yeah.
And it was just really a stubbornness, and granted, I had a gift and I loved it, and that's probably really what got me past most obstacles, was just that I loved it, and I knew I had a destiny doing it, and there was nothing going to stop me.
And how did Burning Tree come together? Was that a band you auditioned for, a band you formed? What's the history of that?
No, I never really auditioned for any bands ever. I was just always making them. It was just friends from school, really, and we had a singer, and our bass player left to join Broken Homes, which was Craig Ross's first band, and they got signed MCA, and so we knew we were getting closer, so we got another bass player, and then I couldn't do it with the singer anymore, so I quit and then invited the rest of the band to join me. So, and then they're like, well, who's going to, I just said, well, man, if Jimi Hendrix can sing, I can sing. And I just started writing lyrics and singing to this music I was making. And the other two guys did too. And so we just took turns singing. Basically, that was kind of the deal.
And then you get signed by Epic. In terms of your studio experience for the first record, how did that go?
I had been in the studio quite a few times up to that, not making entire records, but doing demos and playing with other guys. I did some studio work on a record for Cathedral Tears that I was in, I think, for 8 months or something. The singer from TSOL's band, Jack, and it was kind of new romantic at the time, and I was super young, and they had to come pick me up to go to rehearsals. But it was cool. You know, I was ready to do it. We all thought we were the best people around. A&M was sort of courting us before that, and we went into Sound City and recorded demos on that board that the movie was made about. And then, of course, I was back there again years later with the Crows. But we were in there doing demos with Ethan Johns. And Rick Murata, the drummer, had sort of did some pre-production work with us. And I remember a night we were rehearsing, he was trying to talk to Donnie, the drummer, about something, about, you know, being more deliberate and not so sort of messy and all over, but, you know, maybe do half as much with more intent, you know. He wasn't quite getting it, and he says, "Can I show you what I mean?" And he grabbed the sticks and sat down, and we played the same thing, and he just laid into this beat, and my whole world opened up. Like, oh, wow, that's what it feels like, you know, because one guy in a situation can either elevate or just destroy whoever's playing with him, you know. And so that was really a light bulb moment, like hearing Hendrix for the very first time. That changed my whole, I didn't know that was allowed. You know what I mean? Like whoa. So when we finally did go to record, we basically just went into a giant studio and followed orders, and played live pretty much, you know, and it went well.
And how did you feel about the record after?
I just loved the fact that we were making one. You know, I mean, we got a record deal, and of course, you know, waiting to hear a word from the record company. You know, they go, "Oh yeah, we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks," and of course, those couple of weeks felt like 12 years, and you know, every minute of every day, or why aren't they calling me back? Yeah, I got a life. They need to, you know, and it's just silly. Yeah, but you know, so we have a record, and of course we have a manager, and we're gonna go on tour, and we got new gear, and it was all very exciting, and it didn't really dawn on me until we were sitting on the plane about to take off to go to England for our first tour. We go there for a month, and I'm sitting on the tarmac about to take off, and it dawns on me like, wow, I'm gonna go farther than anybody I know in my family. You know, because I play guitar. Like, this is cool. You know, of course, except for Grandpa who went to war. I went to my own war.
How was the response then of that record?
It was really good. Critics loved it, and it gave us a lot of hope. There was quite a bit of press. They did the record label did their job. And they were frustrated because they really liked the record, but they just couldn't find a foothold anywhere with radio or kind of how to market the thing because it was just so out of vogue, you know. So the critics loved it. And the people who did come and hear about it seemed to love it. We just couldn't really get a bigger audience. So until the Crows were doing the same thing on the other side of the country, kind of. And I met Chris because a guy from NME, I can't remember his name right now, was telling each of us that there was another band with guys that are doing similar things, so we had heard about each other. And then I got a promo copy of the first record. And I remember my wife and I driving down the road, and I had my brand new ghetto blaster in the back of my Dodge Dart with my earnings from my, my advance from the big record company.
Yeah.
And so I put the disc in and took off and pulled the car over, like by the beginning of the second song, and I said to my wife, I go, listen to that guy sing. He sings the way I play guitar. And I said, I'm going to play with that dude one day. And then it was short after that we had heard about each other, and of course we became friends, and then we opened for them for a little bit, and they found a little place in the radio world, and it was gone, from there.
Oh, they exploded, yeah.
And we just couldn't get it, so I ended up we were doing demos for a second record for Epic, and they were just, we don't hear the songs, and we're going like, this is the best we got, and we're giving you gold here, guys, and they knew they weren't going to be able to do it, and they didn't want to get in debt anymore, or I didn't want to, they didn't want to be out of money, so they let me off the contract, and I think we owed $300,000, which to me at the time was an absurd amount of money, but they let us off, and I didn't know what to do. I was kind of sick of trying to run this circus that I had going with a few people, and so basically when Chris asked to join, I was ready to just be a guitar player, and because I was just fed up and a little let down from the whole record experience and touring, and so that started a whole another thing.
Yeah. So when you joined the Black Crowes, then it was just because they knew you enough already that did you have to audition? You said you didn't really do the audition thing, so was it a straight offer?
No, I mean, Chris and I kind of had become friends, and I'd go to their gigs, and they'd have me, sit in, and then Chris would fly me out. He flew me out for a week once just to hang out on tour, and I think it was kind of a long courtship, and when they were done with that tour, they could and think about doing another record. That's kind of when, and so I flew out to Atlanta, and we had a sort of informal jam, and it was just a lost weekend. I went, and on my way home, they said, that's why that they brought me out here, just, see if it was going to work. And so I went home, and a week later flew back to do the record.
So at that point, for the second record, was it completely written and ready to go when you came in and played, or was there some writing involved? How'd that go?
It was pretty much done for the most part. The brothers wrote all the songs, and everyone else played along, and that's just how it was set up.
That's kind of the band dynamic, right?
Yeah, I mean, I flew out there, and we rehearsed in Chris's garage for 2 days, I think, maybe. And the songs were mostly done, except for some endings, and it was still a little open-ended. And we went in and recorded the basic tracks for everything in 2 days, and it was just some overdubs, and we were done.
I remember when that record came out, there was a lot of talk about how quick it was. So it really did get turned around that fast, eh?
Oh yeah. I mean, they had been on tour for 18 months, so they had learned how to play their instruments pretty good and play well together, And I thought I knew what I was doing, and so. We were having such a good time, and it just worked. There was a great chemistry there, and it was just happening right away, and it was just, I mean, that's a phenomenal record. I love I love that record. It stands, you know, it's, it stands tall.
Oh, yeah.
In the forest of rock records,
Oh, yeah.
I think. And it was just a blast. It was, you know, young kids. You know, I was still in the garage jamming.
Which is amazing. And you think with that record, the first record did so well, you would expect the pressure to be on for the second and sophomore jinx and all that. But it doesn't seem like that was the case. How was the atmosphere?
Well, I didn't know too much about the business end of things. I just knew that I liked these guys and I liked their music, and you know, there was still a very small community of us who played rock and roll music, and so we felt like we were really, we were it, man. You know what I mean? Like all the other people were lost, and we were on. You know, us going backwards, we're essentially going forwards, and we were just having fun trying to be our heroes and play as well as the people that we loved, and you know, and that was always our goal. Always, I mean, we just did nothing but listen to music on the road, and you know, getting into a certain city with a really great record store was a big time. You know, we'd plunder this thing and come back with our booties and show each other and like, all right. And I had a real musical education there for a few years. It was great to be able to hear so much different kind of music and be exposed to a wealth of different styles, because the brothers had grown up with a great record collection because their dad sang in the 50s and had great taste in music. So they had Sly records, and they had Booker T. I mean, Otis records, and just like stuff I'd never even heard of before in California. So it was a real education in music for me, from being in the suburbs of L.A.
Yeah.
You know, I had a bunch of knuckleheads who I hung out with that were metalheads, and then one of my friends turned me on to Jimi Hendrix, and everything turned. You know, so my and the radio out here wasn't really playing the Allman Brothers much, you know, or anything far off except for California music, basically, which kind of was a little soft for the most part.
Now, when that record comes out and then Remedy becomes that massive hit, were you guys already on tour when it happened, or did it hit and then the tour happened? Because that must have changed things pretty instantly.
I don't really remember. I mean, I think that, you know, I don't know. I'm guessing the tours were all, at least my first tour then was to go to Japan, and you know, it was all planned and ready, and then released the record. Like, I'm sure it was all set up right, and I mean, so I mean, there was that second record thing. You know, everyone wanted to see what was going to happen to the band after such a giant success on the first record, and so, I mean, it had to be set up properly for the, you know,
oh yeah, totally,
the biggest impact.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they did exactly. I just, you know, to me, it was just, I was playing with some great guy. We were making great music, and I was about to, you know, I was getting to buy cool clothes, and I'm about to go on the road, and, you know, here it is everything I've been working for, you know.
And that song had a big reach. I remember back then, Steve Vai did a record with Devin Townsend, and it was kind of like a Korn before Korn kind of thing with lots of guitar solos. And he had a song called Pig on it. And he said in interviews that was his attempt to write a song like Remedy. And it was like Steve Vai doing Zappa, you know, crazy stuff.
Yeah, I got it.
It shows you the reach that everybody wanted to write one of those songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that tour, were you guys headlining it by then?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was there. I think it was Well, they opened a lot of bigger shows on the tour before. I mean, for quite a while, at the end of it, when we were having some real success, they were opening for ZZ Top and, arena bands. So I don't know how much they were actually headlining. I think it was their first really, like, headlining tour for real, And we went to Japan and played into these theaters, and, at the time, the Japanese fans couldn't stand up or, get in the aisles, or he was very controlled and
Yeah, I've
subdued,
heard that.
and they all sat and they clapped quietly. We come out with No Speak No Slave and bang and the lights and then at the end you just hear like some clapping, and I look over and I said, the crowd was, is it us? Is it me? Is this supposed to happen?
Yeah.
Maybe I did something wrong or something.
Are we bombing?
Yeah, it was just Japan at the time. It was so surreal, the beginning of my new experience.
Was Japan always a big market for the Black Rose?
That was the only time I went with them.
Oh, yeah.
Except for when we did the reunion stuff. We did the Fuji Festival, but that's like, we spent 2 weeks there in 92, I guess. And we went for the one gig, we went back.
Right.
But Japan had really taken to the Burning Tree record too. So I think there was always a market there.
Right. Yeah, it's just a whole separate beast over there. You never know what's gonna hit, and it is often not what hits in the States.
Yeah, it's a bizarre world. I mean, it's a trip,
Yeah.
the East. So.
Okay, so you finished the touring cycle for that record, and then did you jump right into the next one, or was there a big break?
No, we were working all the time. I mean, if we weren't on the road, we were doing TV stuff, or we were getting ready to do something else, or there just wasn't there was no break. We would do 6 weeks on and take maybe 10 days off and go back and do 6 weeks, and that's how you did the year pretty much.
And was Amorica written the same kind of speed as the last one, or was more time taken on it?
I don't know as far as the songwriting, because that was done between the brothers. We worked on stuff for sound checks.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So sound checks and then rehearsals, they'd come in with a new batch of songs and you guys would work them out?
We didn't really rehearse. We were on the road so much, the band didn't need to rehearse, and we worked stuff up either on stage or at sound checks and on the bus or what, we were just always together.
So you're looking at a pretty good cycle of, 4 or 5 years there where it was just nonstop.
Yeah.
So what led then after the third record you did with them? That's when you moved on, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What led to you moving on at that point? That would be like 96, 97 or so, I think.
Well, I had my struggles with consumption, and I was kind of disillusioned by this whole thing because I got everything I wanted and it was fun, and then it got to be exhausting, and then it just got to be, oh wow, I'm at the beginning stages of alcoholism and drug addiction, and I feel like crap most of the time. You know what I mean? And my family at home is falling apart, and like this really isn't giving me any of the answers that I'm looking for, I guess. It's so I kind of just at one point I just sort of slid into apathy in a way or something. My heart wasn't in it, so I wasn't doing anybody any good. So it was time to be done.
So you leave a band, that big, and you're sound like you're burnt out on the whole thing. What did you do? Take some time away and then start up again, or?
I got into heroin really good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It seemed to make sense. I mean, I was divorced and back at my mother's house and jobless, and heroin seemed to make sense.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't advise it. It's a bad,
Yeah, it's a bad idea.
bad way to go, yeah.
How long was that for?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, messed around with it for a few years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a day-to-day thing for quite a while, but it did end up to that. And so, there was a few years of bouncing around in and out of rehabs and stuff. And I just got back to writing, and then made a record and toured with Blue Floyd a little bit, and that was kind of a reason for Woody to get to play guitar and for me and him get to play guitar together. And then when he passed, it just wasn't the same anymore. And so I just, I just kept playing around town and just did the only thing I knew how to do was keep writing and keep playing music.
So when you got things together again, did you start a new band or work on a solo project?
I don't know. I didn't. I kind of like the idea of a band, or several. I have a few groups of people that I like to get together and play music with and call them different. Like I have a Neptune Blues Club, and there was the Sinners for a while, and because it's a different thing with different people, and so I can take the same song with a different group of people, and it has different qualities to it that keep me interested and inspired and to play with these other people, and it keeps me on my toes, because if I tend to get a little bored if I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and then I'm not fully in it, and if I'm not believing it, why would anybody else?
And I'm trying to wrap my head around the timeline in terms of, like, I know you played with Ben Harper.
Yeah.
And then your first solo record was kind of like 2002 or so. In terms of the timeline, how did that all lay out?
Well, let's see. I was playing with Chris Stills. That's how I met Ben, and we did a Horde gig, like on the B stage somewhere in the Midwest, and we were playing Ohio for an encore. And afterwards, this guy come up. I had no idea who he was, and he just said, "Man, I was walking past and I heard this tone, and I just stopped in my tracks, and I had to come see who was doing it and with what." And he was just blown away, and I was just, it was Les Paul into a Fender Deluxe and loud, and and this tube screamer thing. So I asked him to play on my record that I was probably did shortly after that, and then when he needed a guitar player, he got a hold of me, 3 to do the Diamonds tour.
And after, I would imagine that would be a decent sized tour then. After a few years of bouncing around, how was it to get back on a bigger stage like that?
It was cool. It was cool to get a paycheck again.
Yeah.
And it was cool to be playing with some great guys, and I don't know. It's there's just there's a level of excellence that you have to rise to when you're playing with guys that good, and just that stage and that setting and so many people watching and so much is on the line. The energy is just pretty intense, and I think it's kind of one of those things that once you've been there, anything but that can be a little, you know, less than, you know. So it was good to get back there, and I still had notes all over the floor. It was like a couple of gigs into it, and we did that Hollywood Bowl thing that was filmed, and I still had paper on the floor with notes of chords on it, and so it was cool. I was thrown back into the big running machine, and I knew how to do it, and it was fun. The guys were great, and then we got to make that There Will Be a Light record, which is really great. Another record that we recorded all the music in 2 days, and you know, just Ben would show us a song, and we'd make up an arrangement and record it right there. You know, just move fast. And it's the way I've always made music. It's do your homework, get really good at what you're doing, and then don't give yourself too much time to think about stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, second
get in
guessing.
there and do it. You'll figure it out if it works or not.
Now, in terms of your first solo record, It's About Time, how did that come about?
That was just me writing songs again, because I did that until the Crows, and then there was really I didn't see any reason really to write, unless I really had to sometimes, just for my own sanity. I had nothing to write for. I wasn't going to get any songs and on any Black Crowes records. I mean, I was an employee. You know, there's certainly they're gonna, you know, hey, got any songs? So I didn't really see the purpose, and so when I did get time, they came pretty quickly, and thankfully a friend of mine funded it, and so I got to make that record, and that's how that came about.
Right. And then I suppose that was, you know, a couple years later, and then the Black Crowes reunion happened. How did that come about?
Yeah. I just got a phone call saying, you know, because I think that they had shut it all down or something, or went on to get back together, and they want to get together that lineup again, and you know, it had a special quality to it. You know, on our worst day, that there was something just really easy and intense about it. So, you know, we all owned up to stuff, you know, from the past, and you know, and it was cool to get back in there and develop relationships now as older people, instead of like really young kids who had no business, you know, getting into the things that were offered to us, you know, available to us, and no one ever said no to somebody who's making everybody money. So it was great because, you know, I didn't really have a relationship with Rich, and during the first time, because I was his brother's friend, and I was a threat, I think, you know, and he was a younger guy, and so then the second time around, Rich and I kind of developed a friendship that, you know, we found out a lot about each other we never knew in all that time together, you know. And so in that sense, it was cool. It felt like, okay, now we're grown men coming back to see if, you know, is there even anything left in this? And it was really clear immediately that there was.
The response, I recall, was pretty big. People were pretty happy to have that band back.
Yeah, I think that Steve didn't even, you know, he didn't want to believe it, or wasn't interested, or he wasn't there in the beginning, and we did a bunch of warm-up dates, and then you know, the New York shows, and about it, I guess somebody told me, maybe it was his cousin or something, and he goes, and Marc Ford's doing it too? And he goes, yeah, Marc's doing it. And so when we got to Atlanta, he showed up at sound check, and the drummer that was with us went home. And we didn't rehearse anything. Steve just started, and that was our first gig with him. And it was, you know, it was nothing.
Awesome. And then why did Why did you leave the band the second time?
It was just getting to be. It started, you know. If you're not intentionally making new grooves, you're gonna default to the old grooves, and things just started getting ugly again. You know, I mean, you're essentially in a marriage, you know, with 5 other people in each other's faces and their families, and you know, it's just the easy part is being on stage. It's the other 20 hours of the day that you have to get through, and that's the hard. And it just, you know, it can get ugly, especially when your family at home is getting destroyed by it.
Right. Yeah.
So I had to make a choice. Am I going to keep my marriage and something at home? Because my wife and I had remarried since, and you know, am I going to do this, ruin it again? You know, because there just was no time.
Yeah.
And there was promises of time being off, and it just always got filled. And so once again, I saw nothing but being, you know, I want to just, there wasn't any time for anything else in my life. It just consumed it. So I had to make a choice, basically.
So when your time, you know, did free up again, you did a couple more solo records. And interesting, that was Blues Bureau, which is kind of an offshoot of Shrapnel Records, which kind of had the big heyday in the 80s with all the shred stuff.
Right. That's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't that funny? How were they to work with?
Yeah. Well, it's just Mike Varney, really. And he's a great guy. He's really smart and, you know, runs his thing his way and has his audience and kind of makes tons and tons of records. And he offered me a 2-record deal, and so it was the best offer around, and so I did it, and, you know, toured and then found Bingham, and that happened. So I had some busy years there.
He just signed a kind of an online distribution deal, so a lot of those records are now Spotify, and a lot of stuff that he wasn't really doing before. Are those records finding a bit of new life now that there's a bit more available on the digital side?
Well, the Neptune Blues Club record has always been, it has been for years. I think Weary and Wired was, maybe not. The Neptune Blues Club record, it charted on the blues charts the first couple of weeks it was out. So maybe that has something to do with it. I
Sure.
don't know. I don't know. We had our disagreements. You know, I sort of felt that I had an audience that was outside of his, and he had one that was outside of mine, and it would behoove each of us to, you know, cross over and for him to stretch out of what he had an industrial line record making process that he did, and I didn't. You know, so where he made the records, he basically made background records for guys to come in and play solos on. And I just said, I'm not going to make one of those records. You know, that's not how I do it. So he let me do my thing for 2 records. I mean, it was cool. And he makes a certain amount, and when they're sold, they're done. And
Right.
that's just how he runs things.
So when you did Fuzz Machine and you were kind of a free agent, how did you approach that?
That was the end of a long year of touring with the band, and I had written songs, and same deal, kind of, I'd show them and at sound checks, and we'd play them at gigs, and then so the band was playing great, and I had these songs, and I thought, you know, when we get home, guys, can you give me 2 days? And you're off the hook. And so we went in and recorded that record in 2 days. We basically just set up live like we did and played through the songs.
That seems to be, from talking to you, that seems to be how you've recorded your whole career, live in the studio.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really, I mean, I've done my share of overdubs, but I've never really made a record where it's, you lay the drum track down and then the bass player I've watched it, and I've worked on some records like that, but never any records I've really been involved with. It's always the band together, and then what you don't get, you add on.
Now, in the days of home studios in the people's bedrooms, is that getting harder and harder to do? A little hard to record drums that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a curse and a blessing. It's anybody can make a decent sounding record, and the problem is that anybody can make a decent sounding record. It's I don't know, the heyday of millions and millions of records being sold by a lot of people, right? Are over for now. I think there's the few that get to do it, and obscene amounts of money are spent to make obscene amounts of money, and so the music is kind of back to the way it always has been. You got the people who are really musicians and do it for their life. Essentially, you just gotta go play it for people, and make the money you can, and you sell T-shirts, and you just keep going, and that's what you do as a musician. You play music, and I think other people just want to be pop stars, and there's a big difference, And when music, I knew when I started seeing the Saturday morning cartoons for kids that the trend was that all of these characters were in a rock and roll band. I'm like, oh man, I'm at Saturday morning cartoon now. That's what, it used to be held in great respect. Like back in the, biblical thousands of years ago, people, I heard like Jews would say if they couldn't get into a synagogue to hear somebody preach, that they would just find musicians on the street and go sit under them and listen. And they would hear from God, because they figured if those people could make that sound and have it please them so much, that God had to have great favor on these people. Therefore, you're listening straight to God. And so that went from there to Saturday morning cartoons. And, there was, but whatever. It's I had to figure out one day, like you said, was it hard to get off of it? Yes and no, because there was a point where I was at sound check with my little band playing in this really nasty little club in Culver City, and no one was there, and I was starting to really feel sorry for myself, and then I just stopped and I go, why do I do this? Does it really matter who's watching? It's like, no, I do this just as hard when 2 people are in the room as there might be 200,000 people watching. You know what I mean? Like, I do it just as hard because I love it, and it doesn't matter. So once I sort of had that realization, it's all been good. It doesn't really matter. It's nice to get paid.
Yeah, of course.
But I play music when no one's watching, so you can't. That's my first love, really, And so now it's just got to hang in there and not quit.
So what is now? You had your last record last year. Is it new music, touring?
Yeah, I actually have studio time booked for February, and I'm going to take the Neptune Blues Club up there to San Francisco at a place called Tiny Telephone with the guy John Vanderslife, who owns it and makes incredible sounding records, and it's all analog, and it's all just bitching giant knobs, tube stuff, and kind of like the way it was when I started, and so I'm looking forward to that. And then, we got plans to tour. We're making plans to tour after that. I'm excited. You know, there was a few years here where I moved here to San Clemente, and I was sick of music. I couldn't even listen to it. Like, I just really didn't care. I think I obsessed over it, and you know, in an almost unhealthy way for so long that I was just exhausted and couldn't hear it. And just, you know, recently, in the last couple of months, I've just really been excited just to, you know, put on a record while I'm driving and just get so into it again and love it. So,
Any final words?
yeah, go see music before you can't anymore. It's like we all got lives, and that music pays for our lives, and we need you guys to come out and support it if you like it. It's not made for free.
That was Marc Ford. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Most of his stuff is pretty easy to find on iTunes and Amazon, and you can check out marcfordmusic.com to find out more about it. That's it for this week. If you liked what you heard, please leave a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really does help get the show seen. Until next week, I'm Brian Sword. Thanks for listening to The Double Stop.